Welcome to the VP Marketing Show, a podcast that takes you deep inside high-performing marketing teams to learn what they do, how they do it, and how they get better every day. We cover strategy and execution, brand and demand, metrics and team structure, today's realities, and tomorrow's opportunities. If you lead a marketing team, you aspire to the top job, or you're a CEO who hires and manages a VP marketing, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the VP Marketing Show. I'm your host, Steve Watt, and today's guest is Jasmine Martirossian. She's VP Marketing for TÜV SÜD Americas. Now, this is a really interesting conversation. Less than a year ago, Jasmine moved from a 200-person, primarily U.S.-focused company to TÜV SÜD, which is a 25,000-person global organization. We talk a lot about how different that environment is and what challenges and opportunities it brings. We talk about driving change and the recent establishment of a global center of marketing excellence in particular. This is all about unifying the tools and the processes and breaking down silos to maximize global collaboration. We talk about building and maintaining a culture where people feel empowered to try new things, where they have the courage to take ownership, and to learn, and to fail. And finally, we talk about the importance of building personal brand and active engagement on LinkedIn, and the vital role that the executive team and the marketing team play in leading the way. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Please welcome Jasmine Martirossian, VP Marketing for TÜV SÜD Americas. Jasmine, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Steve. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
So I would be remiss if I didn't start with the obvious question. TÜV SÜD, not a company that a lot of people are familiar with, I don't think, or am I wrong?
Well, TÜV SÜD is a huge global organization that's headquartered in Munich, Germany. We're over 153 years old. We touch pretty much every aspect of testing, inspection, and certification. So from the laptop or cell phone you and I are using, to the clothing we wear, to the furniture that's around us, to major structures out there in oil fields, in refineries, we engage in testing and certification. We help products with global market entry, and we play an integral role in global trade.
How big of a company is it, and how big a presence is there in the Americas where you're focused?
My focus is on the Americas. Our primary markets are United States, Canada, Mexico, and Brazil, and we're looking to further expand in Latin America.
How many employees do you have in the Americas?
Over 1,500, and we have a global base of 25,000 employees with about 1,000 locations globally.
This is a much different environment from where you came. You're a little less than a year in this role. And prior to that, you were VP Marketing at the Training Associates, which I believe is a couple of hundred employees and based just outside of Boston.
Yes, the Training Associates has a couple of hundred employees within the office, and they work with about 25,000 instructional designers and industry experts as their network of service providers. But the focus of the Training Associates, though it has engagements abroad as well through the clients, is primarily in the United States. TÜV SÜD is a very complex, truly global organization where you really actively have to collaborate with your counterparts in different parts of the world, from Singapore to Europe, to different parts of Asia. So it's a very different organization, and I actually thrive in the opportunity to present, to work with different cultures, to meet really interesting people, and to collaborate with really innovative solutions. And it's not just like lip service to innovative solutions. With driving our interests and priorities and strategies forward, we help each other get better globally. And we actually have a really solid system of communication when we're truly in touch rather than working in silos and isolation. That makes a huge difference, and it creates for a really fascinating working environment.
How does that relationship play out on a day-to-day basis? So you're running marketing in the Americas. You've got a global counterpart in Germany. There's marketers all over the world, I presume. How much of your day-to-day is focused on your region, and how much of it is focused on global collaboration?
So I'd say probably 80-20 rule applies. So 80% it would be focused on the region and 20% would be focused on collaboration. Our global counterparts for now are primarily in the Singapore area, but we'll also work very closely with Germany. This morning prior to this call, I had a lot of very effective exchanges with Germany. For instance, they have developed a campaign and they asked if we would be interested in utilizing that campaign here. We're very excited. We welcome that. And then we might develop assets and campaigns, and we like to be good corporate citizens. So we would contribute it to the pool and say, hey, there you go. Our digital presence, which is probably the lifeline of any organization today, we have an interesting structure where a lot of the site development is done out of our global office in Singapore. But then we have the US site. We collaborated to launch our US site in a record 2-month period. And that was tremendous collaboration with our global marketing leader, Liz Fand, and me. And we were able to literally launch that in 2 months, a record time. But that's critical to our well-being in terms of digital marketing and presence. And we had that shared vision and we made that happen. And then since then, it's not a one and done approach. We constantly drive further innovation and collaboration. We may find something, we say, how about we drive this? How about we improve that? It's a constant dialogue, and it helps us get better.
A lot of people in smaller and mid-sized companies are reluctant to move to a larger company because they're afraid that bureaucracy is going to slow them down. They're going to spend all their time talking about things and not enough time actually making things happen. And I'm hearing loud and clear from you that that's not the case at Tuve Sood. You are moving quickly and you're being responsive to your market. How is it that you've seemingly been able to avoid those pitfalls of larger company, slow bureaucracy?
A lot of it is mindset. I actually was really, because I love being at TTA, but I was also happy to be recruited into this global role. And the primary attraction was the global collaboration, which, as you're saying, in somebody else's mind might be, oh my goodness, this is going to be bureaucratic and slow. But the reality is it's in our mindset, right? It's what we are thinking of and how we're approaching it and the relationships we build, because we all have an opportunity to drive change, and change does not happen. Like, we're all parts of that culture. So for instance, if any one of us is complaining about it being bureaucratic, but we're agents of that organization, we have the power to change. We have the power to talk with people, change minds, change approaches, come up with solutions that are different. And that in itself is very, very invigorating and inspiring. So, you know how living in a big city, to be really effective and not alienated, you have to turn it into a small village. Most of my life, I have lived actually come to think of it, my entire life I've lived in big cities. But still, you create the intimacy of relationships, you personalize it. So a big city to me never feels like this impersonal, alienated place. The same goes to organizations. You have to build relationships. And once you do that, you're really able to be a very effective agent of change. And so are others. So it's a process. It's not an overnight thing, but it can be very exciting.
Speaking of change, when we were chatting a little bit earlier today, you mentioned that there'd been some pretty significant change in the structure of the marketing organization. You want to tell us a little bit about that? What was the need for change and how did that play out?
So in the Americas, historically, each business unit, think of it as a division, had its own marketing operation. And they were doing a good job, but when you're fractured like that, you're not seeing the full forest. You're kind of seeing individual trees. And our President and CEO, John Tesoro, has big visions for growth, for expansion, and he had the insight that this needs to be centralized. And indeed, I'm glad to have had to be at the helm during the period of that centralization. And we have actually delivered tremendous results. We're already seeing the outcome of that. Additionally, Dr. Annabelle Geithner in Munich at our corporate headquarters had been driving an initiative to look at marketing, and they came up with this concept of centers of marketing excellence. So our America's marketing team is the first one to implement the concept, and it really looks at best practices. So as a result of this, we can be a more agile, a more directed, more focused organization where there is more specialization, yet at the same time, we see a greater perspective. Indeed, initially, when I started here, we had multiple ways of how a lead would enter into a CRM or not be entered at all. We had multiple tools that some business units utilized, and they were very effective, yet others had no access to them, and they did not know about it. So that leads to a siloing effect. In fact, we have an initiative that our CEO has started, John Tesoro. It's called One Tube Zood. It's about breaking down the silos and really looking at the whole. So truthfully, that's beyond lip service. In real life, we now have marketing campaigns that are really exceeding market averages. We're cross-pollinating, cross-selling. We're collaborating really closely, and it's a very different environment, and results speak for themselves.
Regular listeners of this show would know that one of my recurring metaphors that I seem to see, rightly or wrongly, I see happening everywhere is this idea of a swinging pendulum, and that things are done one way and then swings in a different direction, and then different problems tend to swing it back again. I think we're seeing it across many things. I've seen within global organizations, sometimes the swinging pendulum, they go through phases of saying we need to be much more decentralized. We need to be closer to our local customers. We need to better understand the nuances of each market. So we're going to break down these larger organizations and push things out more into the field. And there's benefits and challenges of that. And then they start to feel the pain of not having that global or broad regional collaboration and different tools and the different metrics and everything that you spoke of. So then the pendulum starts swinging that way and everything becomes globally centralized. And then, 5 years later, it starts swinging back the other way. Do you feel that you guys have found a good balance between global approaches and, let's call it, regional in-market nuances, or do you feel that you're still finding your way?
That's an excellent observation and question. I actually agree with you. If you look at big corporations, there is the swinging pendulum of centralization versus decentralization. But when you think about it, it's about being agile and finding the efficiencies. Usually the pendulum starts swinging when people get stuck in one way of doing it and they deem it to be kind of the only correct way, and common sense leaves the scene. And then it becomes too bureaucratic, and then things are not being accomplished, and then the pendulum swings drastically in the other direction. So it's about being agile. It's about really being awake to the reality and never sitting on your laurels. You cannot ever, ever, ever claim that you have arrived. In fact, we actively practice the philosophy of kaizens, which is the Japanese philosophy of driving ongoing incremental improvements. And with that, you actually can course correct as you go rather than waiting for the catastrophic change to occur. I mean, you have to actually embrace change and drive the change rather than be the passive recipient of the change. That's what, to me, defines successful executives and successful organizations. You always have to be ahead of the curve. And that takes actually a lot of discipline, and it takes a lot of drive and actually ability to keep perspective on what you're doing and not be so enamored with what you're doing. Actually, it takes courage. It takes courage to say, yeah, we're doing it this way, but actually we can do this better. Because a lot of the time, people get married literally to the one thing they have come up with and they're doing, and somehow that's accompanied with fear that if we change this, oh my goodness, it will mean that we were not doing it right in the first place. So those are limitations of mindset that executives place on themselves. And if we can be open and honest about it and say, hey, we're driving continuous improvement. This is about layering. We do this and then we learn where we can improve this and do better. That's an entirely different mindset.
Finding the right balance between things that are eternally true and long-term strategically vital versus things that very much should be tested, iterated, optimized continuously. And striking the right balance there is hard. Are there any examples that you've had where you kind of feel that maybe you got some of that balance wrong and you were able to course correct?
We'll start doing account-based marketing. And so they're aimed at major corporations where we're doing, let's say, business with one part of it, but we could be doing work with many parts of it. So it's about driving their awareness of our brand to become top of mind, especially when we already have relationships. And with some of the companies, our effort is going really well, but then there is one company where we're getting absolutely no traction at all. And there are factors for that. They will not open any external email and other things. So you have to take their culture into account as well. And you know what? It's absolutely okay to say, look, we identified this, but this is not the right organization for us to work with. It's a waste of our time to be doing ABM with them. Let's redirect our efforts. It's okay to kind of evolve and assess all the time, because otherwise, if we don't, we will be just stuck repeating the same thing without delivering results, and that's not strategic.
Absolutely. That sounds like a perfect example where what is long-term strategically vital is developing a powerful ABM practice, but what will be continuously iterated along the way is which accounts you target and the channels and the measurements and all the pieces of it. Your faith in ABM isn't wavering. You are just intelligently iterating your way towards success. How far down that ABM road are you guys? Have you been doing it for long? Is it a big part of your overall marketing?
Well, it's all new to us. So we've been doing it only since June. So it's several months, but we're dedicated to doing it. And we actually have some good success examples, and only one account was completely unsuccessful. And again, there are reasons for that. So that informs our decision making for the next round of introducing ABM. Or we're learning from ourselves. So we're doing, let's say, something with a certain industry, but then there are other bigger organizations in that industry. If we're to target them, we now see what worked in the first example, what was better, and we try to utilize that. It's kind of rinse and repeat, but do it better with better ingredients. It's about a mindset. It's about driving ongoing improvement without making your team feel that they failed on the first pass, because that's a critical factor. Sometimes we're so afraid of failure, we really arrest our ability to progress and innovate. And the quest for perfection really holds people back from doing solid work, creating the undue fear where people just do not know how to act. That's when it becomes unduly bureaucratic. That's when people are not empowered. That's when everybody starts checking their opinion before even voicing anything.
How do you create a culture where people feel comfortable to fail? I think it's one of those things that it's easy to say and hard to do. It's easy to say, oh, well, we encourage people to take intelligent risks and we don't want people constantly covering their butts and we want, everyone's going to agree with that. But then putting that into practice is hard. How do you make that real?
Several factors. First, you create a culture where not only do you say that in interviews and places, you actually talk to your people. You're, first of all, not doing performance reviews once every 6 months, but you have constant collaboration with your team. And you actually say, let's try new things. Let's try this. Let's see how we succeed. It's okay to fail. You create kind of a zone, a safe space where you can experiment and try things. And frankly, if marketing is not experimenting, that's a recipe for death. So, so you're not going to succeed without trying new things. I mean, without iterating, without really exploring what else could we do? What could we change? Sometimes less is way more. And having the courage to say that, having the courage to break down a web page that's one very long page into 4 dedicated pages and creating the content cluster with those and linking them correctly. All of that is driven by experimentation and measurement. Like we use Hotjar as a tool, so we see how people are behaving. And so by doing that, it creates a culture of true innovation. And it's okay to say, let's try this. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And if we fail at something, we look and see, okay, why did we fail? Why does this not work, right? It could be an internal factor, could be an external factor, but just learning from what we're doing and being a true learning organization, that makes a difference. I mean, those are the organizations that actually evolve and have breakthroughs. To be stuck in only one way just does not help anyone. And former boss Grant Carter had a rule that I keep practicing myself. He would say no surprises. That too builds a culture of transparency, because a lot of the time, if somebody feels they have made a mistake, if they are to sweep it under the rug, that's not going to help anyone. In the end, it's all going to come out. But if we are problem solving together, then it becomes, and I'm talking about not micromanaging, but actually having visibility and transparency. Then it creates a culture, again, where people are willing to try new things, innovate, throw out new ideas that they may think it's unpopular, but in reality, it may have really huge legs to stand on.
In my experience, one of the most powerful words to try to make that culture real is hypothesis. Good marketers ought to always be generating a lot of hypotheses. And by their very nature, some of them will turn out to be true and some will turn out to be false. But when that's part of the language and part of the mindset, then it's not, oh, Jasmine's saying we need to do such and such because she's adamant that that is the right thing to do. And then it turns out that it's not. And now it's a black mark on you, as opposed to, well, this is just one of Jasmine's hypotheses that we are going to test with the belief that some of them are going to turn out to be very successful and very true and others not so. And I've found that it's funny how a small change in language like that can sometimes change the thinking and change the actions of people. And people are a lot more comfortable to say, let's try that. I have a hypothesis that perhaps if we change this, it might cause X, Y, and Z to happen, but I don't know. Let's test and find out. Am I kind of getting it right in terms of the way you approach these things?
You're raising an important issue. That's a huge value of mine personally, from a professional perspective. And generally in life as well. To succeed in anything for anyone, you have to have a sense of ownership. So it's interesting, the language, the example that you used. If my team members were saying, oh, Jasmine is saying do this, then they don't have ownership of it. Yeah, so people have to, then they're going through the motions. But when people have a sense of ownership, it's their own. Fundamentally, in doing whatever we do, we have to run it like our own business. Think of it as your own money of your budget. Think of it as you're running your own business, because that's when you succeed. Think of it as your sense of ownership. If you start owning the experimentation and innovation, and that should be the team culture, then it makes a difference. Because if it's just about Jasmine, that's not too relevant. But if it's about the team, it's about every person feeling empowered, that's relevant. I throw ideas, and actually very often in conversation, I'll come out and say, just actively disagree with me, look at another perspective, because from a socio-psychological perspective, it's so often happening where a dominant idea emerges and in effect it silences lots of other good ideas.
A related topic to that I know is important to you is personal brand and really empowering your employees to get out there on LinkedIn and get out there in public and build personal brand and advance the interests of the company at the same time. Tell us a little bit about how you think about that and how it becomes real in Tuvzud.
That's a great question. I mean, the concept of a brand is on everybody's lips today, right? Everybody's talking about brand, but how many are really succeeding is an entirely different proposition. By shorthand, brand is something that people say about you when you're not in the room. When there's a strong brand, people will actually vote with their decisions and wallets because it engenders trust. But fundamentally, what a lot of organizations miss out on, and at TIVZIT we're very keen not to make that happen, is they forget that their brand is expressed through every single employee they have. Because the employees that are on the front lines, every single interaction anybody on the outside has with any single employee of ours, that's an expression of brand. And how people reflect our brand makes a world of difference, because we could be sitting in executive meetings and saying all those great things, but if the people on the front lines do not reflect the brand that we are in terms of our quality, dedication, trust, and support, then we've missed that boat. And hence, LinkedIn is now this unbelievable forum for the exchange of ideas, for building relationships. So it's really important for people's personal brands to be strong because they're also the reflection of your corporate brand. We have top experts. We want them to shine. We want them to be out there and highly visible and engaged because that's a reflection of our corporate brand. So we are also creating a lot of employee spotlights. And guess what? Those are getting tremendous traction in terms of their performance and metrics, in terms of engagement that outsiders are seeing. We appreciate our employees, we appreciate their talent, and we want to share that with the world rather than put an impersonal, face forward.
Do you purposefully encourage people to get out there on LinkedIn and engage and build brand? Is it a matter of purposeful encouragement, or is it a matter of just letting, being comfortable that some will and some won't? Or, and on that scale of some companies make it very difficult to do that. Other companies very actively empower their people and encourage their people to do that. Kind of where on that scale are you?
We're very actively encouraging that. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Houston, Texas at our LaPorte facility, which focuses on chemical oil, gas, construction, formerly a petrochem acquisition. And we did a kind of organization-wide webinar seminar there. So some people were in the office, some plugged in remotely. And I personally offered them LinkedIn training. And I've been so impressed with those people because since then they've come to me with questions, they're posting, they're engaging, they're improving their profiles. They are a part of our brand. And again, we can't be talking about those things without modeling behavior. I personally am very active on LinkedIn because, again, I am part of our brand. And that loyalty, the dedication, it actually comes through and it speaks to the quality of the work we do. So change does not happen in a vacuum. Change happens with action. And to me, any leader, I don't care what your role is in marketing, you have to model the behavior. And I can't be telling the rest of the organization, be active on LinkedIn. Let's say if marketers themselves are not active on LinkedIn.
That's so important. That's just so critical what you just said there. I've seen organizations where it's like, oh yeah, we need to get out there, we need to do this, but then the leaders are, I'm too busy for that. But you all do that. Well, in the absence of those leaders modeling that behavior, as you said, people A, don't believe that it's important, and B, they don't believe that they're safe. Right? There's some fear when you put yourself out there that what if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't hit all the right notes? But when they see their leaders out there being engaged and being authentic and not sounding like a rehearsed press release, then it tells them that this really is important. And if the leadership is finding time to do this, it must be valuable. And also, I now feel comfortable that I don't have to be perfect.
Yeah. It goes back to creating a company culture that's inclusive, that actually celebrates the people, that allows their best selves to come forward. And that comes with certain openness. with encouragement, with valuing of their talents, with emphasizing the positive and working from strength. I'm a huge believer in the Clifton Strength Finder tool, and we have great news. Our Vice President of HR, Jobina Gonsalves, she's actually a certified Clifton Strength Finder trainer. So again, when you create that kind of a dynamic within the organization, when you emphasize working from strength, you're really helping bring out the best in people. And again, model behavior, act, offer help. It's one thing to say, thou shalt do that. But it's another to say, listen, it's okay for you to come to me and ask. I'm happy to show you. Next time, you'll do it on your own. You have to really extend a helping hand. And I don't care what your role in the organization is. You can't just be high and mighty. To be an effective vice president of marketing, because this is a show about vice president of marketing, you have to really model behavior. And that's extremely important in helping drive that kind of positive change in any organization.
I totally agree. One more question before I let you go, Jasmine. You're coming up on your first anniversary in this role and in your new company. What's next? What are some areas that you are going to be pushing forward over the next year or two, whether it's expanding things that your organization is currently doing or it's launching into entirely new areas? But now that you've really got the lay of the land, what's next?
That's a great question. I think what's next is continuing to have awareness of staying current. Since we're doing a podcast, I'll tell you, we'd love to have a podcast because we'd love to feature a lot of our experts and our client organizations' experts. So that's definitely something for us to explore. The digital frontier is still huge for us and will continue being that. Nowadays in marketing, it's about digital and content, and you have to have both sides of the coin, right? Making sure that we're utilizing our technology in an intelligent way. And fundamentally, staying fresh and current to be able to tell wheat from chaff in marketing. That is so important because there are so many consulting firms, offers, new technology. It can be overwhelming, but having the rigor of knowing where we should be, where we should focus on. And the other part is courage. Instead of doing 15 things in a very kind of mediocre way, it's much better to do 5 exceptionally well and keep improving on those and maybe then introducing other things. So that, and being strategic, not being driven by the flavor of the day or the week or the month, laying out strategy and saying, this is how we're evolving. So for all our lines of business, we now have strategic plans that we're executing on and keeping them current, and that drives mutual accountability as well. So getting better at what we do, continuing and building on that, that's a continuous effort. And above all, we have to have a frame of thinking, the mindset of, driving iteration, improvement, and getting better and trying new stuff, driving the change, not becoming stagnant. That's really important.
Such great advice. Thank you so much, Jasmine. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been Jasmine Martirossian, VP Marketing for TÜV Süd Americas. Thanks so much for joining us on the VP Marketing Show.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your time and interest as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the VP Marketing Show. We hope you'll join us next time.